I've really enjoyed all the talks this morning, which is good because I thought I was going to see Star Wars. I looked for them, so it's nice to get a laugh. I know not everyone is dead. It's a graveyard shift, I know that. We'll try and liven up a wee bit. We will have a PowerPoint that you can focus on with glazed eyes and nod when I nod, and usually I find that gives the impression that everyone's listening. I have slightly changed my title, and I'm going to have to sit down and stand because I have a bad back. But it's now an analytical comparison of ethnic minority runaway advertisements in Scotland and North America. I don't think it would be particularly instructive just to give you the Scottish ones, when the work I'm doing is a comparison of language. It is a great privilege to be speaking here today, and I'm thankful for Kimberly, Kelsey and Andrew for organising the event. And this research comes from a Leverhulme Trust-funded project at Glasgow University. We're indebted to John Cairns, who sparked the idea in Simon's head about runaways in Scotland and then developed further into Britain. This paper will provide a preliminary examination of runaway advertisements from two sides of the Atlantic, North America and Scotland, during the first 3 quarters of the 18th century. I'm interested in exploring how different enslavement was on both sides of the Atlantic, as revealed in the ways that masters described their human property and themselves in public newspaper advertisements. Quickly, this gives you the rundown so you know where we are and how close I am to the end. Once I get to Wench, I'm very close to the end. Nothing ever changes. North America and Scotland, though. First, enslaved people escaped from and into entirely different societies in North America and Scotland. Naturally, from a population of 250,000 in 1700, with a black population accounting for roughly 11%, the North American colonies expanded dramatically to around 2.78 million by 1780, with blacks making up 20% of the total. The plantation south accounted for most of the growth in the number of enslaved people, naturally, and before the American Revolution, Virginia had the largest enslaved population. In comparison, Scotland's population in 1700 was roughly 1.2 million, and would rise to perhaps about 1.4.5 in 1780, with no more than educated guesswork on the number of blacks in the country. If, as Catherine Pybus has suggested, London's population of 1 million people contained around about 10,000 whites, even extrapolating that, I mean, that's probably an exaggeration, and we can't, it's going to be 0.1% black people in Scotland, I would say, this time, maybe marginally more. Work too then vary between Scotland and America. Clearly, Scotland had no plantations of like of which was seen in Virginia, and a fairly significant landless population contributed a more than adequate labour supply for traditional farming. While enslaved people in North America undertook a wide range of jobs, we've just heard of the significantly narrower variety of roles assigned for blacks in Scotland. And it is reasonable to expect that most of these men and women were brought from the Caribbean, North America, to undertake work beyond manual labour. This simple yet essential fact points to key difference between enslaved people on either side of the Atlantic. The slavery codes, laws, and legal status of the unfree greatly differed. In North America, during the first 3 quarters of the 18th century, there was no escape to a free north for runaways, as would be true during the first half of the 19th century. Slavery was defined and legally enforced to varying degrees in every colony. This meant that there were fewer places to run. The pursuit, as Bly puts it, must have seemed ever afoot. Stephen has shown that in comparison with North America and the Caribbean, slavery and the precise legal standing of enslaved people in Scotland was, at best, unclear. There can, however, be little doubt that these people were de facto slaves. They were brought into the country unwillingly, they were described as property, some described as slaves, they were sold in the country, and they faced possible transportation back to colonies. Few had the status legally changed by masters through emancipation either. While their conditions were seldom as severe as the brethren in North America and Caribbean, this was still slavery. If enslavement was different, so too was escape. Running away presented markedly different challenges on either side of the Atlantic. In North America, escapees generally had a much larger space to try and disappear into, though this could mean, in some cases, greater distances between communities. One advantage then, though, was a considerable number of black people, most of them enslaved, who might provide refuge and support. The large black population too offered runaways the opportunity to hide in plain sight by engaging in what Wall Striker calls cultural hybridization. This also made it possible for some to find work with other masters, those willing to overlook the slave's transgressions for a cheap and grateful labourer. The penalty for being caught, however, could be severe, and of course there were even some advertisements that included larger rewards for the return of the slave dead than alive. In Scotland, runaways would often have less distance to travel to get to busy-ish towns and cities, with a much larger general population to hide amongst if they crossed the border into England. The crucial difference, of course, was the overwhelming whiteness of the Scottish and British population. Except perhaps in the largest port cities, a small number of fellow blacks must surely have hindered escapees' movement. And during the first 3 quarters of the 18th century, there is no surviving evidence of any kind of black support network for runaways, although if they had existed, it would most likely be London, Bristol, and Liverpool. Outnumbered by whites who might view every black person with suspicion, runaways faced dangers like the ones raised by Stephen, when a Scottish man decided to capture a strolling Negro as if he were a strayed horse, without provocation of any advertisement for his escape. Of course, we cannot know for sure how much of this information the potential escapees ruminated on or even realised. However, these details are important to bear in mind when analysing the construction of the runaway slave advertisement, for the authors would surely have taken such factors into consideration as they contemplated how best to reach out to their intended audience and hopefully secure the return of their stolen human property. So next we'll have a quick look at the stylistic differences and similarities. Descriptions of the physical and mental characteristics of the runaways are generally very similar between Scotland and North America. Once the project's finished, we'll be able to expand this to Britain and do a more, this paper originally did look at some of the British adverts rather than just Scotland, but we'll be able to do a more detailed comparison once the database is complete. The length of the Scottish advertisements is fairly short until about the 1740s and then gets longer thereafter. The North American ones are fairly long throughout the whole period. The increase in Scottish adverts after the 1740s was mainly made up of expanded descriptions. This suggests that there's a need for more precise portrayals of individual runaways, probably because a slightly growing black population in Scotland and England made it more precise differentiation and delineation necessary. North American advertisements had always contained more detailed descriptions for this very reason. So here's 2 adverts, one from 1790, one from 1768, both the same font size, to give you an idea of the difference in size. Rewards. Whereas cross-Atlantic payments could vary from money to tobacco and other goods, and sometimes reasonable charges paid, and even some colonies set out precise rates of reward to be paid by owners for those who captured and held runaways. In Scotland, the rewards almost invariably were of ready money and costs incurred, though what's fascinating is often the exact amounts are not explicitly mentioned in Scotland. There are warnings too, there we go, against hiring, helping or harbouring runaways, which are fairly common in both sides of the Atlantic. They are formulaic, but clearly indicate owners' fears that others might effectively steal their property by, as I said, employing or benefiting from the labour of runaway slaves. And these are early conclusions, and as I said, we'll be able to, I will be able to have a greater detailed analysis once the project is complete. My own research is essentially a critical discourse analysis of the Scottish press in the 18th century. I'm interested in how the prominent and dominant elite used discourse, and in particular printed discourse, to ensure their continued hegemony. So it's from this angle that I approach these advertisements, with the belief that some masters attempted to use construction of the advertisement to reinforce their own social status and to undermine and delegitimate that of their slaves. Given the uncertain legal standing of the enslaved people and slavery itself in Scotland, such affirmations were important. Thus, one of the most notable and perhaps crucial differences is the very explicit and boldly advertised role of the master in North America, where virtually all owners included their names in the vast majority of adverts in Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. This is so obvious that few historians of North American runaways have actually commented upon it, but its significance becomes clear when considering its Scottish advertisements. In Scotland, where the legal status of slavery was less clear and where slavery and enslaved people were far less common, in many runaway advertisements, masters assume a much more backgrounded presence in the advertisements, foregoing inclusion of their own names. The purposeful omission of their name could be for privacy, masters unwilling to be made the local gossip's topic du jour. Arguably, it could also point to a general uneasiness about appearing in an advertisement, especially by the mid of the 18th century, as some may have been unsure about how the whole situation would be considered by a growing literate population. Other owners chose not to omit their own name, but that of their escaped human property. Perhaps the enslaved person's understanding of English was not yet sufficient for them to be aware of their name. Perhaps the chosen name had not yet been decided upon, or perhaps even the owner disapproved of the enslaved person's personal choice of name. By denying the runaway his or her name, the master obviously dehumanized and marginalized them in an attempt to wrest control back from the unfree after the resistant act of escaping. Crucially, this was also an attack on the enslaved person's status. By stripping them of their names, it removed one of the main tenets of social existence and standing in Scotland. Three other main indicators of status during the period: dress, work, general skills, and we can also include language proficiency, all could be determined by the master in his description. Owners were able to disparage the escapee and undermine the social importance of the unfree as a whole. He speaks tolerable English after the Negro dialect. He speaks bad English. There was another one. He speaks hardly any English, and what French? Not good, which is also not particularly good English. An added consideration is that enslaved runaways also have been deceiving their masters, underplaying skills that may have helped their escape, for example, proficiency in the English language. If we were going to escape, you would play that down. And yet another point to remember, as Wojtowicz and Smith have suggested, is that owners may have been describing the slave, of course, that they wished the runaway to be, projecting their idealistic notions upon the escapee. Essentially another way of marginalising the unfree by ignoring individuality and self-determination amongst the enslaved. And so Scottish masters had to tread carefully. They found themselves somewhat inhibited by polite society, but also inhibited by a society that generally found itself unsure, uncertain, and perhaps even unconcerned about how to position blacks. For their colonist counterparts, the reputation of this outgroup was cemented, their subordinate status firmly established and entrenched. But this was not the case in Scotland. Without a wholly negative public mental model of blacks and enslaved people to aid their cause, and with their legal propriety somewhat tenuous, masters had to be careful how they presented their escaped property lest it unfavourably influence public opinion themselves. Now, one fascinating example of this is the word wench. So we're nearly at the end. So the use of descriptors for female runaways. The word wench is used to describe some runaway females in North America, whereas so far we haven't found wench used to describe any Scottish or indeed English women runaways at all. British use woman, girl, or maid. So it's intriguing then, a Negro wench named Patience. So these are the two dictionaries. Samuel Johnson, obviously from England. Noah Webster was the American first recognised dictionary. So Samuel Johnson, definition of wench is a young woman, taken from Sidney Shakespeare and Donne. A young woman, little used. A young woman in contempt, a strumpet. A young woman of ill fame, a strumpet. In America, a black or coloured female servant, a negress. So bear in mind the first appearance of the word wench in North American advertisement sample was 1752, 3 years before Samuel Johnson's dictionary. This shows a mutation of the word over time and over space. from a strumpet, a promiscuous woman, to a black or coloured female, a negress. This telling synonymy indicates the unfortunate role many would automatically ascribe and others forcibly prescribe to black women in North America. This variation can partly be attributed to the enforced role many unfree black women had in North American society as sexual objects to their masters, or as women viewed by white men as being sexually promiscuous. It also harks to the unabashed positioning of masters and their property in the society discussed earlier. So, we're on to the conclusion. If you lived in 18th century Scotland, unless you're extremely wealthy or worked at the docks, the chances of interacting with a black person would be fairly small. And if you lived out with any major trading cities, perhaps minuscule. Such white Scots, if they thought about black and enslaved people at all, had to form their opinions based on what they read or heard, and at best perhaps a passing glance as an enslaved person accompanied his or her master. It could then be argued that these masters were constrained by the very limited first-hand experience the Scottish public had with black people. Yes, news articles of Negroes on foreign shores could populate the papers, the press detailing bloody uprisings, dangerous rebellions thwarted, savile rituals in exotic lands, reports almost invariably negative, coloured by ethnocentrism, colonial aspirations, and the editor's eye for a good yarn. These reports would certainly inform the general public's mental model, their imagined construct of a black person, though for many it would still be very abstract, too distant a threat. These violent and awful brutal stories were certainly at odds with the black that could be encountered on British shores. In North America, because these reports presented examples of real threats, news that could be corroborated first-hand or at least more easily envisaged, white society had to ensure that black people were controlled. Their subjugation necessary for the continued dominance of white people, the strengthening of a new society and economy, and the securing of self-esteem and social position. In the blacks that lived amongst them, ordinary Scotland did not see a crucial cog of their economic wheel or a threat of insurrection. They did not see an abandonment of civilization or a potential usurper of their social standing. It is possible that in the Runaways, the everyday Scotland saw a variation of themselves. Everyday Scot saw a variation of themselves. The advertisements that black escapees generated often strikingly similar to the thousands for escaped white servants or army deserters, providing an understanding of their situation and perhaps an empathetic link for their unfortunate situations. This is not an argument to say that blacks in Scottish societies found themselves inside civilization, but that through examples we have seen in all three papers, two papers rather, they appear in language and constructs of runaway advertisements that have been closer to civilization than those in the colonies. These are very early findings of my thesis, and I'm interested in hearing any thoughts or avenues of exploration to further my understanding of the issues, and thank you very much for your time today. The last slide is if you want to contact us at the project with any information you find about anyone of any non-white basically in Scotland, we'd be fascinated to hear it. The database is collecting all the advertisements we find from the British newspapers on non-white runaways, but it will also have a repository of information relating to any mentions of black or ethnic minority experience in the British Times. Thank you very much.